The saying goes, heroes get remembered, but legends never die. And while Rocky Bleier is most definitely a hero, you better believe he is a legend. Bleier is known for fighting in the Vietnam War, only to return to the NFL and blaze a legendary career that led to 4 Super Bowl rings. Most people know the name, but most haven't heard the full story. His is a tale of both struggle and success, but most of all, it's a story of perseverance, that no matter what happens to you, you can always keep pushing forward. Bleier's a Midwest kid turned war hero who then became immortal in the eyes of the Pittsburgh Steelers faithful. Now get set, because this is the story of Rocky Bleier. Robert Patrick Bleier, better known today as Rocky, was born in Appleton, Wisconsin back in 1946. Appleton was a mill town where just about everyone in the area worked at the local paper mill, but Rocky's parents owned a local tavern called Bleier's Bar, which was the hub of the small Wisconsin town. Rocky was the oldest of 4, and because his family actually lived on top of Bleier's Bar, he and his siblings had a lot of interaction with the blue-collar residents of the town that often frequented Bleier's Bar after work. And it was actually at the family bar where Rocky got his infamous nickname, back when one of the customers pointed at him when he was just a baby sitting in his crib, saying that he looked like a little rock. Then Rock turned into Rocky, and the name stuck. Appleton's blue-collar mentality was ingrained into Rocky at an early age. When he was just a kid, he decided to start up a paper route around town, and this led to him being known by just about everybody in the area. And even though he was working hard at his paper route for now, he knew that eventually he was destined to either work at the mill one day like his grandfather, or maybe in the tavern like his dad. But this never really bothered him, and he remembers sitting back in the family bar with his dad and his friends, and they'd always tell him, whatever you do, be the best you can be. And this mentality stuck with Rocky. Growing up, he lived his life based on a saying he heard as a boy that reads, "As you think, so you shall be." Meaning, if you think you can do something and you choose to devote yourself to working towards accomplishing it, you can achieve anything you set your mind to. And while he wasn't disappointed about his future of most likely working at the mill one day, he decided to try his hand in athletics just to see if it could maybe take him in another direction, and if nothing else, something to have fun with while he lived out his youth. Although he entered Xavier High School as an average, maybe even undersized freshman, he knew that he had some real athletic ability that separated him from his peers. There weren't many activities Rocky didn't enjoy when it came to athletics, and throughout his high school career, he was a 3-sport athlete participating in football, basketball, and track and field. Coming into high school, he didn't necessarily think it was realistic that one day he might make it to the pros, but because of his strong mindset and goal-oriented personality, he decided to start off by setting smaller goals. So going into his sophomore year, he thought about what it would take to make the all-conference team in football, something that is not an easy task, let alone as an underclassman. But he did earn the starting spot at running back and also saw time on the defensive side of the ball, so he figured if he's on the field, why not be the best? He put his work ethic to the test, and by the end of his sophomore year football season, not only did he make the all-conference team as a running back, but he also made the all-conference team on the defensive side of the ball. Along with reaching his goals, he also led his team to an undefeated season. Following this exceptional year, he decided to set the goal of making the all-state team as a junior, and he did just that the next season, capping off the year by leading the team to another undefeated season. It was after this that he started to receive some real college interest, and he capped off his high school career by earning all-state honors once again in football, where he was also named the team captain. Along with football, he was named the team captain on both the basketball and track and field teams as well. And following his illustrious athletic career, it was time for him to choose which college he would attend in the fall. Now, considering no one in his family had ever gone to college before, he didn't know how to make a decision on which school he'd like to attend. So, being the good Catholic boy he was raised to be, he decided that the best way to make such an important decision was to pray on it. Because of his strong faith and knowing it would make his mother happy, Rocky decided to accept a football scholarship to play at the University of Notre Dame, a prestigious Catholic university. Before Bleier began playing for the Fighting Irish, they were led by head coach Joe Kuharick, who produced an underwhelming record of 14 wins with 25 losses during his time in South Bend. But by the start of Rocky's freshman year, a new coach, Ara Parsegian, had been hired. And in Parsegian's first season coaching at Notre Dame, he led the team to a 9-win season that produced only 1 loss and a Heisman Trophy winner. After this season, Parsegian would never look back, and by the end of his time with Notre Dame, he would boast a record of 95 wins with only 17 losses, while also claiming 2 consensus national championship titles, the first of which came during Bleier's junior year in 1966. Bleier was a solid contributor to his team's successes by all accounts, but he wasn't necessarily a star player by any means. His work ethic, determination, and leadership abilities were what helped him stand out. He didn't get any playing time as a freshman and saw limited action in his sophomore campaign, where he only had 187 yards from scrimmage with 2 TDs. He would progress each year though, and in the team's national championship run in 1966, Bleier's junior year, he finished the year off with 491 yards from scrimmage and 5 touchdowns. Going into his senior year, Rocky was named a team captain, and his stats slightly improved once again, where he would end the year with 528 total yards and 7 TDs. His stats definitely don't fly off the page, but you have to keep in mind that this was a different era of football, and while Bleier was a running back, he shared carries and really pulled his weight as a blocker. He wasn't an award-winning running back in college like he was in high school, but his role in winning a national title, partnered with his leadership qualities and hard work, were enough to grab the attention of some pro scouts that were interested in giving him a chance at the pro level. Hoping he'd get drafted to his hometown team, the Green Bay Packers, Bleier attended a Packers game with his father after his senior year at Notre Dame. And it just so happened that the Packers were playing the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, Bleier knew he wasn't the biggest guy, standing only around 5'9" or 5'10", so he thought he'd look at both teams' rosters and see if there were any other players his size to get an idea of who coaches would be willing to take in the draft. He saw that one of the Steelers players named Jim Cannonball Butler was listed at 5'9", 190 pounds, just about the same size as Bleier. Seeing this helped Rocky's confidence because he thought, well, if he can do it, at least there's a chance that I can too. Then, on the third night of the 1968 NFL-AFL draft, Bleier was sitting by his TV watching the evening news when the sports anchor came on and announced that the draft had concluded and that Notre Dame's Rocky Bleier had been selected by the Pittsburgh Steelers. He had been selected in the 16th round at the 417th overall pick. Now, today there are only 7 rounds of the NFL draft with just 257 players being selected in total. But back in 1968, there were 17 rounds of the draft with 462 overall selections. And even though Rocky was one of the last players selected, because he'd been drafted, he knew that there was a chance he could make the team. And that's just what happened. Bleier successfully earned a spot on the Steelers roster for the 1968 season following minicamp. He even managed to get playing time in 10 games, though he only produced 39 yards rushing and no touchdowns. But most importantly, he was still on the team, and therefore, still living his dream as a professional football player. But while Bleier was fighting to keep his NFL career afloat, a bigger fight was happening abroad in Vietnam. By 1968, the United States had already begun drafting soldiers to help with the fight in Vietnam. And from the start of the drafting period in 1964 to its end in 1973, over 2.2 million American men were drafted to fight for their country out of an eligible pool of 27 million, which was roughly 8% of all eligible men in the US. And crazy enough, among that 8% of men drafted to fight in Vietnam was Rocky Bleier. Bleier knew what the circumstances of the world were at that time, but he was under the impression that because he was a member of a pro sports team, the Steelers would look out for him and help him stay in the US to play. And while the Steelers did make an attempt to keep Rocky home, they were ultimately unable to make a case to keep him in Pittsburgh. So, on December 4th, 1969, just 3 days after playing the St. Louis Cardinals and only 4 days away from playing the Dallas Cowboys, Bleier was drafted into the United States Army and shipped off to boot camp. Rocky wanted to continue his pro football career more than anything, but he was proud to serve his country. Thinking back to when he was just a kid in Appleton and people would tell him, whatever you do, be the best you can be. So now he was going to be the best soldier he could be. Soon after finishing boot camp, Rocky volunteered for duty in South Vietnam, and in May of 1969, he was deployed. There, he was a squad grenadier and operated a grenade launcher. He knew the dangers he might face, and he accepted the responsibility that came with the task at hand, but he never forgot about his dream of playing pro football. So he actually tried to formulate a plan to stay in football shape by devising a workout regimen that he could follow while in Vietnam. In his mind, he thought that if he could just get back to base camp, he could find different ways to work out, like running, body weight workouts, or even lifting water cans that could act as weights. And he managed to do this for a short time, but in August of 1969, he would find himself fighting not just to stay in shape, but fighting to survive. Rocky's platoon was sent on a patrol in Hiep Duc, located in the south-central coast of Vietnam, on a mission to search for wounded comrades in the area. While searching throughout the jungle, Bleier and his platoon were ambushed and forced into a firefight. And during the ambush, Bleier was hit by a bullet in his left leg. It was a frenzy, and his platoon appeared to be surrounded on all sides. Bleier and the other soldiers were in a panic as the sounds of ammunition firing came from all directions. Shot in the leg and trapped, helicopters and gunships came in to lay cover fire by shooting rockets into the jungle to help give some relief to the troops on the ground where Bleier was. As all this was going on, medics began running around to help where they could, but the medic in view of Bleier was shot down, and the radioman suffered the same fate immediately after. Rocky's platoon was able to set up a defensive position in the heat of battle, while his commanding officer was trying to see where exactly the enemy was located. All he remembers was praying to God repeatedly to help him get out of this situation alive. As Rocky was praying, he saw a grenade bounce off his commanding officer and roll into his bunker. He dove away as quickly as he could in an attempt to avoid the blast from the grenade, but his right foot had been hit with shrapnel that left Bleier temporarily unconscious. Next thing he knew, he woke up in a Japanese hospital. Miraculously, after falling unconscious, Bleier was somehow pulled to safety and rushed to the hospital where he would remain for 6 weeks. For his efforts in the battle, he was awarded the Bronze Star and a Purple Heart for his service and sacrifice. Initially, when Rocky was in the hospital, the doctors told him that they were most likely going to have to amputate his leg due to the severity of the injuries he sustained. But in the end, the doctor was able to save his leg, but he told Rocky that he'd probably never be able to run again. And with this news, that meant his dream of continuing a career as a pro football player came to an abrupt end. Rocky was at the lowest point in his life, but at this time he received an unexpected letter in the mail. It came from Steelers owner Art Rooney, and the message was simple. Rock, the team's not doing well. We need you. This letter lit a fire in Rocky, thinking back to his childhood motto, as you think, so you shall be. And he decided then and there that he was going to do anything and everything he could to get back to playing football. When he finally made it back home, he had lost 30 pounds, but he didn't rest for a minute. He immediately forced himself into a rigorous training program to get back into shape. And through aggressive weightlifting and physical therapy, he was able to build himself up enough to attempt running. And even though every step he took was excruciating, he just kept going. And before he knew it, the 1970 NFL preseason was starting, and Rocky had an invite to Steelers training camp. Everyone was glad to see Rocky back, but he was now walking with a limp, and Coach Chuck Noll could see how difficult it was for him. He even attempted to convince Rocky to retire for his own good, but Rocky just wouldn't listen. Everyone in the Steelers organization doubted that Rocky could actually come back and play again except one person, and that was Rocky Bleier. But ultimately, Bleier would be placed on the team's injured reserve list for the 1970 season so he could continue his rehab properly at the Steelers facility. He underwent several surgeries to remove some of the scar tissue that had built up on his foot, and during one of the surgeries, a doctor even found more shrapnel that was still lodged in Rocky's foot. Once the last piece of shrapnel was removed, the doctor was actually able to scrape off the leftover scar tissue in Rocky's foot, and he was finally on his way to recovery, or at least as full of a recovery that he could have. During all this, Bleier was actually waived by the Steelers twice during the 1970 season, but he remained persistent and kept working towards his goal of a comeback. And against all odds, Rocky actually returned to the team's active roster for the 1971 season and even began playing sparingly on special teams, where he appeared in 6 games. After the 1971 season, he stayed primarily as a special teamer, but he did get one carry in 1972 where he gained 17 yards, but he fumbled at the end of the run. He managed to get 3 rushing attempts in 1973, but would actually fumble on 2 of the 3 carries. Through his first 4 seasons as a member of the Steelers, he only had 124 total yards, 0 touchdowns, and 3 fumbles. He was a fringe special teams player, but honestly, none of that mattered. He made his pro football return, and there was nothing left for the war veteran to prove. Rocky knew all of this, and at the end of the 1973 season, he chose to retire from the NFL, knowing that he was most likely going to get cut during training camp anyway. But during that offseason, Rocky got a call from Steelers linebacker Andy Russell inviting him to an NFL players dinner, and at this dinner, Russell convinced Bleier to come back and play. He told him, "You can't quit, Rock. You've got to come back. You got to go back to camp and make them make a decision as whether to keep you or cut you, but don't make it easy for them." This conversation lit a new fire in Bleier, and he made the choice to devote himself into getting into the best physical shape he could, not only to make the team, but to make an actual impact on the team. He knew his football days were numbered either way, so he wanted to make sure he put everything he had into turning himself into a contributor, simply so he wouldn't have any regrets when his playing days were officially over. Whether he was going to succeed or fail, he was going to give it everything he had. And through another round of intense offseason workouts that he put himself through, Bleier put on weight and gained strength and speed he hadn't seen in years. He'd make the roster in 1974 and even rush for 323 yards and 2 scores with another 87 yards receiving. Not only this, but the Steelers would advance all the way to the Super Bowl where they would take on the Minnesota Vikings, who had one of the greatest defenses in NFL history known as the Purple People Eaters. In the game, Rocky would rush for 65 yards on 17 carries, and the Steelers went on to win 16-6 for the first Super Bowl win in their franchise's history. After everything he'd been through, from barely making the roster his rookie year, to being drafted to Vietnam where he almost lost his leg, just to make it back to be waived from the team twice and again barely making the roster, Rocky Bleier was now a Super Bowl champion. Not only this, but Bleier was awarded the George Halas Award, which is presented to an NFL player, coach, or staff member that has overcome a great deal of adversity to succeed, an award that suited Bleier perfectly. And if this was the end of Rocky's story, this would be more than inspiring. The only thing is, he wasn't even close to being finished. In fact, he was just getting started. In 1975, he would see an increase in playing time and improve statistically yet again with 528 rushing yards and 2 more touchdowns on the ground. The Steelers even returned to the Super Bowl where they defeated the Dallas Cowboys in a narrow 21-17 victory, giving Bleier his 2nd Super Bowl ring. Now 30 years old, Bleier would enter his 7th season as part of the Steelers' active roster. And even in the modern era, a 30-year-old running back is usually on the decline of their career. Somehow, this season would actually be the best of Bleier's career, where he would rush for over 1,000 yards on 220 carries and reach the end zone 5 times. This made him only the 5th player in league history to reach the 1,000-yard mark after turning 30 years old. He did all this while not even being the team's starting running back. Bleier was 2nd on the depth chart behind NFL legend and Hall of Famer Franco Harris. Harris also rushed for over 1,000 yards, which made them only the second running back tandem to each rush for over 1,000 yards in NFL history. Following this breakout season, Bleier's production would decrease, but by this point, he was a fan favorite in Pittsburgh. The Steelers would reach the Super Bowl yet again in the 1978 season in a rematch against the Cowboys. And just like their last Super Bowl matchup, the Steelers would come out on top yet again in a close 35-31 game. And Bleier was instrumental in this victory, catching a touchdown pass to give the Steelers the lead late in the game and even recovering the onside kick at the end of the game to seal the victory. In 1979, at the age of 33, Bleier saw another significant decrease in stats, but he still managed to have career highs in yards per carry with 4.7, receptions with 31, and the longest rush of his career with a 70-yard run. And to cap off the season, the Steelers would capture another Super Bowl victory, earning Bleier his 4th Super Bowl ring. Rocky came back to play one more year in 1980, but the Steelers didn't make the playoffs and he decided to retire at the conclusion of the season. He retired as the Steelers' 4th all-time leading rusher with just under 4,000 yards on the ground and over 5,000 total yards from scrimmage over his career with 35 total touchdowns. Following his playing career, Bleier was named to the Steelers' all-time team and was inducted to both the Steelers Hall of Fame and the Pittsburgh Pro Football Hall of Fame. Then in 2007, his high school, Xavier High, even renamed their football stadium Rocky Bleier Field. Bleier has also authored a book titled Fighting Back, the Rocky Bleier Story, which was eventually turned into a TV movie in 1980. In 2014, he was featured in a documentary called Project 22, which follows the journey of 2 veterans on a cross-country motorcycle tour to help find alternative treatments for PTSD. He also began a financial management business with his partner, Matt Zagula, called Bleier Zagula Financial, and is also the co-host to a weekly Pittsburgh radio show called The Rock on Retirement. Rocky Bleier has lived an incredible and inspirational life. Now 77 years old, he is a living example of what you can overcome and achieve through hard work, determination, and belief in yourself. Going back to the quote from the intro to the video, the full quote is this: "Remember, kid, there's heroes and there's legends. Heroes get remembered, but legends never die. Follow your heart and you'll never go wrong." And Rocky Bleier did just this. If you enjoyed the story, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel, as it helps me tremendously as I try to grow the page. But until next time, get set, because I'll have another story coming to you soon.